Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts your work. Plus, we've got our team of legislative advocates on the show today to talk about what you need to know as we head into 2024.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it is just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazueta, ACSA's executive director. I'm Naj Ali Khan, ACSA's senior director of marketing and communications. Welcome after a couple of weeks off. We're so happy to see you today. Go ahead and jump onto the chat and say hello and let us know where you're watching from. Edgar, it's good to be back in the co-host chair after a couple of weeks. How have you been?
Good. I'm not going to lie, I had a little bit of a freak out moment a little while ago because I think I mentioned to you, there's a lot going on in December, and I'm sure everybody can attest to this. So I thought for some reason that today was our last show of the month. And then I thought, as tradition has it, that, it's our holiday show, and I was going to be that kid that didn't dress up to class, that I was going to be the only kid not to dress up. Not to mention you would have mocked me for not going along with the spirit. But then you told me, okay, no, we got one more. So it alleviated a little bit of the stress, but I was a little stressed out that I didn't come through with the holiday spirit. But one more show,
one more show. If it had just been me in the holiday gear and you not in the holiday gear, I guarantee our graphics expert here would have been taking your picture and changing up the attire throughout the entire show. So consider yourself lucky.
Maybe with AI, we were just doing a big meeting in artificial intelligence, and we have an advisory group here at ACSA now that we're trying to think about, how to better serve our members given, this new trend, and everybody's thinking about AI. I'm sure with AI, we don't even have to dress up. I'm sure we can just get real creative with our outfits. Maybe that's the way we go.
Maybe that is the way we go. And folks, that gives me the perfect segue to remind you next week's show is our final show of 2023. It is our holiday show. So Edgar and I will be dressed for the holidays. We invite you to do the same. Go ahead, get a photo of you in your holiday gear. Email that to me, nalicon@acsa.org, so we can make that part of our holiday presentation. Next week's topic, we're going to be talking about state finances and federal finances related to public education. So that comes up.
Which I have to take issue, Naj, because again, we're going to allude to this a little bit on both fronts. There's less than super positive news. So here we're going to be trying to throw out holiday spirit, and then we're going to bump people out with talking about what the fiscal forecast is. So I don't know.
Look,
we'll have to throw a positive spin somewhere in there.
Edgar, it's the joy of the holidays packed in with the realities of finances and public education. What do you want me to do, right?
All right.
Hey, good to see Neri Pais is on with us today, Sheldon Smith with us, Ellen Wheeler, and Gail Olson, our first four, Heather Armelino, Ben Churchill with us as well. So happy to have all of you here. Let's get to a couple of interesting stories that are happening before we get into our main topic. And I want to point out this article that's in the New York Times today about a group of teachers in Oakland Unified School District. The Times is reporting that some teachers are planning to share a pro-Palestinian lesson with their students in what is being called a teach-in. The teach-in, according to the Times, has been organized by activists within the teachers union. The Times is reporting that the materials haven't been reviewed by the teachers union. We took a moment to look at some of those suggested materials, which are all set up for different grade levels on this subject matter. Our friends over at EdSource have published a quote from the superintendent of the Oakland schools saying, she opposes the teach-in, citing a district policy requirement that all sides of a controversial issue are impartially presented. So we'll see how that works itself out. I want to point you out to an in-depth story that's in EdSource as well on superintendents and the factors that are impacting their career decisions. and how that impacts the districts and students. So if you want to take a look at that story, it's an EdSource. Been there for about a week, Edgar, but it's a really interesting story. It's an important story because some of the things that we've talked about here on this show related to COVID, related to community politics and how it impacts school leaders, it's right there. I know you had a chance to read it. What stuck out to you as far as in that story is concerned?
I mean, I thought EdSource did a good job of summarizing some of the things that we hear from our members on a daily basis. As I look in the chat here, there's a lot of superintendents that are actually joining us there, and nothing that was a huge surprise, right? It's things that we've been talking about. This has never been a job, and every superintendent will tell you this. They know what they walked into. They're not rarely will they're going to win a popularity contest, right? Like that's not what the job is about. And it has always been a difficult job, but I think given what started really with the pandemic, then those forces have now gotten into social differences that our country or state are seeing. I think the politics, as you put it, have gotten that much more difficult. And we, it's interesting to see the byline there says superintendents well paid, but walking away, right? And, people, especially in the education sector, they always want to focus on that pay range. I mean, These are the CEOs of the system, right? Like these are our chief executives for the 1,000 districts we have around the state. So yes, while compensation, and I think all of them will concur that, yeah, they feel fortunate to be compensated the way they are. But just given, if you think about what that job entails compared to other industries, I mean, it is a very complex job when you throw in teaching and learning, working with boards, the politics of the community. So it's what we've seen every day, just as more and more of these openings are coming up in many communities. It's harder. The bench is not as deep. Yeah. And I think the article actually pointed out too, that one of the things that actually I did some study on this, my graduate work, that when there is a lot of vacancies, it sometimes forces people who have maybe been in the field the less time, or who traditionally maybe had taken more steps before they stepped into the superintendency. So a lot of good job on EdSource on highlighting these issues. And like I said, it reiterated some of the things that we've talked about here at ACSA quite a bit.
Yeah, and we put a link to that story in our chat. So go ahead and check that out after the show. Check that out. Also want to point out, and we're going to go ahead and put a link in the chat as well. Bring your attention to a program that's being promoted by California's First Partner in collaboration with the State Department of Food and Agriculture. This is the Farm to School program, and there are resources available for school districts out there that will connect local farmers with school leaders to expand the use of locally sourced food and food products in school meals. Now, currently, 163 school districts or educational entities are using the resources, which amounts to about 1.5 million students. But there is support out there. Again, we're going to put that link. In fact, we just put that link out there. If you would like more information, we'll continue to tell you a little bit about that because that program is evolving. But go ahead and jump onto that link after the show again, and get some more information. All right. It's December. There's been a lot to talk about with what's been happening at the state capitol and a lot to look ahead to as we move into 2024. So we brought our experts on to the show to give you the information that you need, what you need to be looking for as we head into the new year. Serette Kaminski and Megan Baier are ACSA legislative advocates. Edgar, I say this all the time, and I'm not, picking favorites, but these are two of my favorite people in the GR department. But again, see, I'm not picking favorites because the others aren't here, so I don't have to say that too.
You may have made some enemies there. I'm sure the other ones are going to be quick to point that out afterwards. But
hey, you know what?
I don't have favorites. They're all equal in my book. But
that's all right.
I'm actually really happy to see. I love when we have guests, and obviously we try to bring in so many external resources. But I have to say, one of my personal favorites is when we have our internal talent come in, and Megan and Serette, we're lucky to have them be part of ACSA. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Did you see, Serette and Megan, how politically correct he was when he said that? Because he could have very easily just followed me and said, "Oh, Serette and Megan, they're the best we have here in this building. They're my favorites too. Instead, like the executive director, he decided to be politically correct about that. So, well, you guys can give him a hard time.
Hey, I'm proud to say every one of the advocates. I think this is still true. I think I got the opportunity to hire each one of our advocates. So I have some skin in the game there. I think we did well.
And don't forget, Edgar was a lobbyist first.
Yeah.
That is correct. All right. Well, Serette and Megan, so good to have you guys here on the show. Megan, let's start with the state's fiscal outlook, because what many of our viewers know is what is being discussed out there. We're hearing about budget deficit. We're getting different figures depending on who you're talking to. What is the real figure at this moment, and what is the impact on public education?
Yeah, a lot of big headlines coming out and more to come. Tomorrow, we're going to see the legislative analysts drop their fiscal outlook, which is the more in-depth analysis of the state's fiscal outlook. But tax revenues are finally in, those November extensions that we've been waiting on and hoping that revenues would materialize. They've come in, and unfortunately, revenue did not materialize. In fact, the funds that we're seeing come in are actually much lower than the state had hoped. So, looking forward to next year, we're looking at about an $11 billion shortfall. The state overall is looking at about a $26 billion shortfall for next year alone. And the 3-year outlook, it's a little bit bigger. It's significantly bigger. The good news, though, is state lawmakers have, over the last 10 years, really stocked away resources into various rainy day funds. So this is not a repeat of the Great Recession, when there were really no tools other than to cut and defer spending. There is a $10 billion Prop 98 rainy day fund. So that will hopefully help buffer from significant reductions. I think the other piece that I would just highlight that's going to, all these pieces are going to come together is we've gotten more data in on estimates for what the statutory cost of living adjustment is going to be within LCFF and for other educational programs. And it's looking like it's going to be very close to 1%. So a pretty low COLA. It's going to put districts in a tough situation with rising fixed costs and the impact of declining enrollment. All these forces are going to make for a really challenging year.
Wow, Megan. I mean, it just reminds me, I get to go to an LPI event later this afternoon, which is looking at the 10-year anniversary of LCFF. And one of the speakers is going to be Jerry Brown. And it's just a reminder for the prudence, probably, that him and that administration, I think Governor Newsom's team continued this about that rainy day fund, right? About putting some of those dollars away. And I think we may be getting to the point where we're going to have to utilize that. Kind of on that note, because I think funding, as you allude to, it's going to be probably the main topic as we get into January, as we talk to our members, talk to our partners. We've been getting a lot of feedback, questions about transitional kindergarten, right? And I know the state had really been keen on the acceleration of the implementation. Given some of the challenges with funding and given the news that you just alluded to, where does that put us with TK?
Yeah, I mean, our districts across the state have been scrambling and doing all kinds of things to ensure the successful implementation of the program. Last year, in the final budget agreement, there were a few provisions that the association was very concerned about and will be our top, some of our top advocacy priorities for the year. So, the first piece, everyone's aware that right now there's a 1-to-12 ratio in TK classrooms. The state allocated additional funds for that. There's been a lot of talk about moving to a 1-to-10 ratio. And in the final budget deal, the state put that in 25-26, districts will have to move to a 1-to-10, but there's no guarantee of funding. So ensuring that if they want to move to a lower ratio, we need to see funding for that. That's going to be a top priority here at ACSA for us next year. We want to get that handled before 25-26. And then I think the other piece that we have heard from quite a few districts across the state who have been accelerating the implementation of TK. They're ahead of schedule. They've been admitting younger 4-year-olds, even though they're not receiving funding for them. At the very end of the budget cycle, there were some provisions thrown in that if you admit younger children, you have to meet that lower 1-to-10 ratio. This happened about 6 weeks before the start of school. Classroom space, staffing, most districts were not able to pivot that quickly, and now they're facing huge TK penalties. So this is going to be a big priority for us to remove those penalties, at least for this coming year. And I would just say, if there are any districts out there that are listening, you're like, oh, that's me, I'm in that situation, please shoot us a note. Diana Vu and our shop and I are in the midst of organizing that effort, and we would love to bring more folks into the coalition.
Folks, want to remind you, if you have questions for Megan and Serette, go ahead and put those into the chat, and we'll tackle some of those near the end of the show. Serette, and Megan's been talking about transitional kindergarten funding, and an aspect to consider is that larger issue of staffing shortage. Where are we on staffing? Since we already know some districts have a lot of open positions that they need to fill.
Yeah, ACSA's been continuing this multi-pronged strategy on recruitment and retention efforts for all levels of staffing, classified, certificated administrators, school nurses, et cetera. And we really do have to have a varied strategy, since, as Megan just highlighted, given our revenue picture, it's tough to advocate for incentives when we're trying to fund implementation programs that are well underway in the field. So we've been looking at barriers to the profession. Where can we seek coursework equivalencies in lieu of high stakes testing, better reciprocity for out-of-state educators that come to California, and then also looking at more flexibility. So, for example, we supported Assemblymember Dolly's AB 1722 that allows LEAs additional flexibility on employing licensed vocational nurses if there's certain specifications met. Another example was our work with other partners to help secure that 60-day sub-extension for Gen Ed, CTE, and special ed assignments, and that lasts through July of next year. And then also our work on helping secure passage of Senator Portantino's SB 765, and that provides teacher and administrator retirees the ability to return to work with more streamlined 180-day sit-out exemptions and that slight increase to the penalty cap. And lastly, we're also looking on ways that we can help open up more pathways to the profession. So, for example, Senate Bill 223, it was a Senator Menjivar bill. That's an example of this. It now allows LEAs to apply to the CTC to run their own PPS, Child Welfare and Attendance Credential Services program. So prior to that law change, only universities could run the program. Now LEAs can do it. And there will be some advocacy just this week at the CTC meeting regarding increased pathways for childhood educators, early childhood educators who've come up through the ranks on the child development permit matrix, and to have them have a possible pathway to the administration credential. Currently, they have to secure a CTE credential first as a workaround. So those are some of our advocacy efforts that we're going to be continuing coming into the next year.
Serette, switching gears to mental health services. I know this is a topic that we've talked a lot on this show, obviously at the forefront of things that our members have been thinking about and the needs of their students. Specifically, Proposition 1, I was going to ask you about it. I know we discussed this on previous shows, but now we're moving closer to ballot initiative. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so basically, prior to it becoming Prop 1, which we'll see on the March ballot, it was Senate Bill 326, and that was a bill that Senator Eggman carried for the administration, and it's meant to modernize the Mental Health Services Act. So it's been 20 years since the millionaire's tax of Prop 63 was passed, and this new proposal would expand the use of MHSA dollars, and it's meant to also address substance use disorders and homelessness. And just to provide a little extra context, there are a lot of negotiations before we got to the final form that will appear on the ballot, as you mentioned. That current allocation of Prop 63, it has set-asides for youth 0 to 25, but the first iterations of the bill proposal didn't have those set-asides. So, the concern was that the pot wasn't going to increase, yet we were going to have increased uses with no set-aside for the youth. So, ACSA worked really closely with other child advocacy firms to ensure that we have those same set-asides for youth 0 to 25, and that we still have them within the prevention and early intervention categories. We were also really successful with other education groups to help secure LEA representation on every county mental health board that decides Prop 63 funding. So that's also a really big win. But with that being said, if Prop 1 does pass by the voters, We do anticipate that schools and LEAs will still have to advocate strongly to maintain that Prop 63 funding at the county local level, and just make sure that with those expanded uses of funds, our youth are still prioritized.
Folks, again, want to remind you, if you have any questions for Serette or Megan, go ahead and put those into the chat. Serette, you had mentioned a couple of moments ago career technical education. Let me ask you just really quickly about master plan on career education. What are we hearing?
Yeah, so in August, Governor Newsom announced through an executive order that he was establishing a master plan for career education. He called on all state agencies and interested partners to come together and provide recommendations that will help strengthen career pathways and prioritize hands-on learning and real-life skills. So what we're hearing is that the administration is signaling that this is going to be a priority for them in the next year. ACSA sent in our letter in late November. We have 4 recommendations. Many of our CTE advocates know that we have a system that needs to have better streamlining, and so we want to streamline those current grant programs and funding streams. We want to link adult education and other concurrent state initiatives regarding workforce development. We want to address CTE staffing and credentialing issues. We know that there are a lot of issues there. And then, of course, we want to prioritize our at-promise students. And so the first part of the EO, the executive order, is just that initial call for recommendations, but there's going to be plenty of advocacy throughout the process. And we'll continue to not only keep our members informed, but let them know where there's areas where we can all engage together.
Oh, I guess I'm up, and I messed up. Sorry, sorry about that, Nash. You threw me off with your follow-up question there. Megan, going back to you, let's just discuss facilities. State support for any okay, let me reset here. You see, you really did mess me up.
I'm sorry, Edgar. I mean, come on. What we haven't been in these seats for a few weeks now.
Facilities. This is one of those issues that we haven't completely gotten. You know, I know there's been a lot of activity. There was conversations. We know what happened in the last state bond. This still continues to be an issue that we get feedback from our members. Going into 2024, what's the landscape? What are the issues that we should be aware of on this front, Megan?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is no more money left in the state school facilities program. So that means that no district can get any state support for any projects, which is a huge concern for us. There are new construction needs still, and there's certainly many modernization needs across the state. So there were 2 bills competing last year that will continue on this year that'll have to get negotiated. There's a bill from Assemblyman Marisucci that would place a $14.5 billion bond on the ballot. It would direct resources to K-12 and to community college facility needs, which has been the traditional approach to facilities bonds. There's a competing measure by Senator Glazer that would put a ballot measure that would fund both K-12 and community college facilities, but also UC and CSU. ACSA is very supportive of the Marisucci effort, and it would allocate more funds. So we'll be part of the negotiations, and we'll hopefully be seeing that measure on the 2024 ballot in November.
Let me ask this question that's coming from Neri. Neri has asked about Senate Bill 765 going into effect July 1, 2024. What can you tell us about 765?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That bill will not help you out until next year. So July 1 of next year, and I believe the relief comes in for 2 years. So, you know, start thinking about how you want to utilize it for the next school year. And then remember, you get 2 years to use it.
I have one final question for both of you, and these are always one of my favorite types of questions because obviously everybody on our team has their specific areas of expertise, but amongst issues that everybody cares about. So just from your perspective, and I'll start with Serette, if I had to have you answer one thing, the one thing that our members should be thinking about, should be on the radar from a policy perspective going into 2024, what would that be, Serette? I'll start with Serette and then go to Megan.
Well, I'm your recruitment and retention gal, so that's what I'm going to talk about. There are a number of grant opportunities out there right now that can help our members with the staffing shortage. So on the CTC website,
All right, Serette, go ahead and for some reason Edgar isn't paying the internet bills here over in the office. Serette, go ahead and say again what you were saying.
Okay, what I was saying is that there are a number of grant opportunities out there right now for our members. So if you go on the CTC website, search the function under grants, and the grant funding page will pop right up. And there are a number of grants that are available right now. So just for example, there's a school counselor residency capacity grant program that can the RFA is available to provide grants up to $250,000 per applicant to support a collaborative partnership between LEAs and prep programs, training counselors. There is a school counselor residency implementation grant program that's for $40,000 per resident for LEAs or a consortium of LEAs. There's also the classified grant program, round 4, that's due in 2 days, but there's going to be another round. There's a couple other that are coming up in the winter, one for computer science supplementary authorization incentive grant program, and then one for reading and literacy. And the last one I'll mention is something that is not up yet, but it should be up in the next month. It's called the Diverse Education Leaders Pipeline Initiative. And that is $10 million that's been allocated to this program. It'll be grants to LEAs to train, place, and retain diverse and culturally responsive administrators in TK through 12. So these are all some great opportunities that, some of them are live now. There's rolling grant applications. So it's an opportunity to help with the staffing shortage now.
And Megan, I have a feeling I know how you're going to answer this question, but let's go ahead and see what you say.
I think the one thing that we need to be paying pretty close attention to is, of course, like the budget, but not just in our little world. Sometimes in education, we only look at what's happening in Prop 98, and we have education programs that are funded. Facilities for one is general fund side, and there's others. I think we need to be cognizant of that, and we think we need to pay close attention to the kind of decisions that are going to be made on the general fund side. It's going to really impact what we can advocate for and how we do it when they're facing pretty serious revenue shortfalls on the general fund side as well.
Megan and Serette, I've made a list here of things we need Edgar to do for 2024. Keep track of the questions, right? And pay the internet bill, because putting us on the system that runs Prodigy or Netscape Navigator is no longer going to work in 2024. You're good with that?
I'll put it on my resolution list. They don't want to answer that. You see, now they're being politically correct there. So.
That's all right. I can do that. Serette Kaminski, Megan Baier are ACSA legislative advocates. Serette and Megan, thank you so much for being with us today here on the lunch break. We'll see you next time. Folks, we've got our Every Child Counts symposium coming up in January 2024. This is ACSA's biggest conference of the entire year. More than 1,000 educators show up for our Every Child Counts symposium. Take a look. Every Child Counts Symposium, January 11th through the 13th. You can learn more about that and register. ACSA.org/professional-learning for more on that and all of our conferences. Edgar, I'm so excited to be able to be at that one, to listen to Dave Dravecki, who I grew up watching as a baseball player. I know you being a Dodgers fan, you saw him many times, has an incredible story. So looking forward to to hearing from him. Again, that's January 11th through 13th. If you like what you have seen here on the lunch break, we invite you to subscribe to us on YouTube or like us on Facebook. When you do that, you'll get instant alerts when we're about to come on the air with breaking news. And also a reminder of when we're coming on for our normal Wednesday edition of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. And if you have great stories happening in your district, we want to tell your great stories. Go ahead and send your photos, your bullet points, your stories to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, at mcarl@acsa.org. A reminder, Edgar, next week, the holiday edition, the final show of 2023 of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Again, next week, we have state advocates and our federal advocates on the show to talk about what's happening here and what's happening in Washington, D.C., and how that impacts public education. Thank you, folks, so much for being with us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.